Ah, there I am. Wow, what a long day. We were actually supposed to, thanks for joining us for this really troubling episode of We Hold These Truths. And once again, I have to do this from my vehicle because yesterday we tried to do this, we had some difficulties, but we felt rather than putting this show off, it was important for us to try to get it done today. So everything came together, and I really need you guys to listen here. There are very rare cases where we get the level of documentation for the case we're going to talk about today. And a lot of elements that we try to educate people on concerning how false allegations can turn into or even blown out of proportion allegations. If you're just targeted by Arizona DCF, you're in trouble. And how these allegations can blow up into severe and life altering damage to a child. And when I spoke to Terry LaPointe, who covered this story a while back when she was still with Medical Kidnap, now she has her own thing going with Real Spark News. I encourage you to follow Terry. She said it was one of the most troubling cases she had ever seen and one of the hardest stories to write because what has been done to this child, Devani, is beyond criminal. It is demonic. It is outrageous that the only people that were held accountable, the only people that went to jail were the people that victimized the girl directly, but not the caseworkers, people in the department that facilitated this abuse. And I'm telling you, they facilitated this abuse. And we're going to get into that. This foster home run by a convicted pedophile, he wasn't convicted at the time, but had some, how many, where is it? 38 police reports to this foster home, 10 DCF investigations. There was substantiation to what was going on, and they still left these children, because it wasn't only Devani, uh, in this pedophile foster care home. And the proof is there, guys, and it's connected to the Department of Defense. And you know, Arizona DCF has needed a reality check for a while, and I don't doubt if there comes some retaliation from this show. As a matter of fact, our guest Beth Breen has been gagged by the court because they don't want this story to be talked about. We recently heard about uh, Melissa Deagle and how after she left Arizona, the U.S. Marshals show up to extradite her from Florida. Then she has health issues while she's in custody, and the jail says, "Oh, she's fine," blah blah blah. Another doctor comes in and says she has a bowel obstruction, which you can die from. I mean, they're totally wrecking this woman, and it seems like anybody that has been engaged in the system with Arizona, they retaliate against. They even had Kelly Townsend, I believe is her name, an Arizona representative that was banned from the courtrooms when she was trying to investigate DCF's nefarious behavior in the state of Arizona. So we are begging you. I want everybody to listen to me here. As you're watching this, as you're listening to this story, and if you have children or even a niece or a nephew or a friend that has a young child, I want you to think about that child and what would you feel if this was a child that was related or close to you? Because this is a real story with a real child whose life is permanently altered. And we need you to share this story. We need to hold Arizona DCF accountable. You know, I used to believe all these representatives and senators when people would go to them about DCF's criminal and unconstitutional behavior when they said, "Oh, well, there's just nothing we can do." But as I've watched what they've done to Donald Trump, I realize there's a lot they can do. They can hold committees, they can hold investigations, they can drag the head of DCF in there and grill them until they find criminal culpability and then move a referral to the attorney general. They can do something, and they're not, guys. And the US Marshals and the FBI, they'll go snatch Melissa Deagle to help Arizona retaliate, but they won't save these children. They'll go after the parents, but they'll say it's not their jurisdiction to go after the criminals, even though they're violating federal law, violating people's constitutional rights and protections, trafficking children, human trafficking, definitely under federal law. So I'm pretty pissed about this story. Okay, let me calm down. We really need you to share this story, but I'm going to let Beth tell it. So Ted, let's go ahead and bring Beth on, and we'll let her outline this story for you. Beth, are you there?
Yes.
There she is. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us on We Hold These Truths. Sorry about the difficulties we had yesterday, but I'm really glad that you were able to come on and work with us here, because I think this story needs to be told. So let's start a little bit about yourself, and we don't have to go too much into that, but just to let people know how you are aware of this case and who you are.
Well, in the past years, I've been a CPS visit supervisor volunteer. So I used to do visit supervision. I would go pick up a child and supervise the visit, take all the documentation and turn it into the caseworker. And from there, who knows where it went. But in 2013, I started driving specifically for foster children. And I got Devanie's case when she was just shortly after her second birthday. So she wasn't very old, two and a half, maybe. So I often wondered why they put this little girl so far away. She was 90 miles away from Tucson and 90 miles away from her family. So I would drive all the way to Sierra Vista, drive 90 miles with this 2-year-old for a 2-hour visit with her parents. Her parents, I can tell you, they were always there. They were never late. She was so excited. Devany was always so excited when she saw me, because she knew I was taking her to her mommy and daddy. And she would sing all the way to Tucson, going to see mommy and daddy, going to see mommy and daddy. She was so excited. And at the end of the visit, it was just horrendous at how heartbroken she was and devastated. And you could just see the fear on her. She would just hold on to her mom's neck and not let go. And it was just horrible. And she would cry all the way back to Sierra Vista, 90 miles, an hour and a half. I actually spent more time with this child than her own parents did, because I spent 3 hours in a car with her on a weekly basis, and she got a 2-hour visit. I never had any red flags about this particular foster home. By all appearances, it seemed to be normal, as to any other foster home I dropped off or picked up at. The mother started telling me that she had some concerns about a urinary tract infection and asked me if I would bring that up to the foster, which I did. And I don't know if she was seen by a doctor, but I do know that urinary tract infection had been going on for 8 months or more. And they blamed the mother for giving her too much juice at her 2-hour visit once a week, which is
Wow.
absolutely ridiculous.
And
Um,
let's back up just a little bit. If you because you have firsthand knowledge of what really happened here, what was the cause for the removal of Devany? I apologize for mispronouncing the young girl's name. Uh, what was the cause for them, as far as you know, for removal from her parents?
as far as I know, and I don't have first-hand knowledge, but reading through some of the documents, there was a verbal argument between the mother and the father outside. Um, a neighbor called the police. The police came out. They arrested mom. She had been drinking. She's she's quite a colorful person and quite loud anyway, but I'm sure with alcohol it was probably quite extreme. So the charges were domestic violence. So dad went down the next morning when she got out of jail and told him there was no domestic violence. It was a verbal argument. And Devany was not even present at the time. She was next door at her grandmother's house. So mom got out of jail. They thought everything was okay. 2 weeks later, um, CPS shows up at grandma's house and takes the child. And so mom and dad are at work. They get off work. They find out their child has been seized. They go down to the DCS office and, demand their child back. And they said, well, there's domestic violence charges against you. And so she showed them that those domestic violence charges had been dropped. Um, that's initially what they charged her, but they dropped them. So they said, well, we think there's a drug problem. She took a 10-panel drug test right then and there on that very same day that they seized Devany, and it was negative, all 10 panel negative. So they still did not return Devany. And I truly believe that the reason why is because mom had a child prior that died of a heart murmur and
Hmm.
when he was 3 or 4 years old, and it was absolutely devastating for her. And I believe that she was either pregnant or shortly got pregnant after the loss of her child. So she put that child that she was pregnant with up for adoption to her mother because she felt like that was the best thing to do for the child. She was devastated over the loss of her baby. So the same guardian ad litem that is handling Devany's case is also the same guardian ad litem that approved the adoption of mom's child to grandma.
Hmm.
Now,
So she was already on the radar.
the same grandma has intervened into Devany's case in the last couple years and has been denied custody of Devany, even though she's been state approved as a foster parent and as an adopted parent. They denied her uh, to get Devany. She took it all the way to the Supreme Court and was denied.
That's just incredible. And as we know, under the Adoption and Safe Families Act, Hillary Clinton's legislation, uh, they didn't get the added incentives unless they adopted children out to strangers. But it seems to me, from my research, this case had a little bit more insidious undertones about why they're withholding this child from her parents. So here we have a verbal altercation. Charges are dropped. DCF has no reason to have this kid, and she's put in a foster home 90 miles away. So let's talk a little bit about that foster home. David, it was the name of the foster parent. He was an employee for the Department of Defense. Uh, why don't you share a little bit about what you know about him?
Well, this this case starts. Let me just back up a little bit.
Sure.
That was Devany's. That was Devany's second placement. Her first placement was in Tucson, and it was with a woman. I don't know how many children she had in her home, but Devany showed up to supervise visits with bite marks all over her, and there are documented pictures of the bite marks. So mom complained, "Hey, why does my kid have bite marks all over her?" Well, apparently, CPS went and asked the foster parent, "Why does the child have bite marks all over it?" Well, that particular foster monster decided that that was that child's too much trouble, and so Devany actually slept in the DCS office overnight until they found the placement, and then they placed her with David and Barbara Frodsham, 90 miles away.
Okay.
So a- after after finding out, when the FBI and ICE and everybody else broke up this child sex pedo ring, I went down to Cochise County Courthouse and I started researching David Frodsham's file, along with the other Army soldier that was arrested along with him. His name is Randall Bijak. So Randall Bijak was a very young Army guy that played in the Army band who had met David Frodsham online and to hook up for sex. And David Frodsham was bringing his oldest foster or adopted son to these meetings and pretty much pimping him out, is what I later
And
found out from
and
the report.
and that's the older foster child that's recently filed litigation against Arizona. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. However, I try to keep an eye on these cases, and they both have been stagnant for a year now.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's a little alarming.
Well, it's not. It's not. It's par for the course in how these people operate. They try to wear people out with just not doing their job or investigating these things. But yeah, apparently, according to the lawsuit that I was able to look up, uh, the child or the older foster child basically says David utilized the state of Arizona in the foster care system to funnel innocent, vulnerable children into his home so he could have a pedophile ring. And these are
Yep.
accusations that are in broad daylight. We have multiple reports of this. He's in prison now for this, so this isn't some conspiracy theory. This man genuinely had multiple people have gone to prison. Genuinely had a pedophile ring running out of his house. So David begins to connect with these people. What did he do at that time? Who was he?
Well, prior to him becoming a foster parent in Sierra Vista, I believe he was in Afghanistan and was thrown out of Afghanistan for, I don't know, having what do they call them, the Bozzy boys or something, a boy chained to their bed for sex.
Wow.
I believe that he had been reprimanded a couple times to the point where the commanding officer had made a report that um, he had some major moral and character issues. So they told him not to come back to that base. That it would only fuel fire. There was a lot of that's when a lot of those soldiers over there were getting into fights because the Afghans were keeping boys. So anyway, they send him back to the States, knowing darn well that this man has a problem, and you can't become a foster parent in the military or working for the military without the military knowing it. So how did this all get brushed under the rug, and how did he become a foster parent? And how did he
With
become a deputy commander?
For the Department of Defense, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we have a Department of Defense employee that already has a history of pedophile behavior, that even mainstream journalists, from what I found, said that the way that his discharge was worded implied this man was raping boys in Afghanistan, and now he's operating a pedophile ring out of his home. Was he still working for the Department of Defense for a time when he was running that pedophile ring, or had he been
Oh,
terminated from
yes.
employment?
Yeah, no, he was the deputy commander of Fort Huachuca at the time of his arrest and had been for quite a while.
That's pretty stunning considering why he was removed.
Exactly. And it was all done with the approval of, our U.S. military and the state of Arizona and Department of Child Safety and whoever else funneled children through there.
And so, how many people, in your understanding, got arrested or charged for this pedophile ring?
3. David Frodsham, Randall Bujak, and Anthony Savage, who was a grocery store bagger down in Sierra Vista, which, I mean, he might have been a small time player. I'll agree with that. But um, this young boy that aged out of the system says he was pimped out since he was 8 years old.
And from what I read, it appears that there are other people suspected. It seems that there were people that actually had top secret security clearances potentially that were associated with this man, who is pimping out
Yes.
children. So, how did the FBI become aware of it? Why now? Uh, did they bust them? What happened with that?
Well, apparently Randall Bujak was transmitting child pornography on the Kick app, and he was going by the name of Pup Brass. He was a musician, so and he met David Frodsham on the Kick app, who went by Pig Daddy or something. I don't. It was so disgusting. He's just so disgusting. Um, anyway, that's how they met up. And apparently, from what I understand from this boy's testimony, is that the older boy would go because apparently they were homosexual, although David Frodham's married. Um, I'm sure he has no preference, but this Randall Bijak told him that he liked children, and so they made an agreement that he would bring children to their meetings, and they actually videotaped it, and Randall Bijak was transmitting it. The FBI, the Sierra Vista Police Department, Cochise County, they all have these videos of a young girl, 3 or 4 years old, being raped by a grown man while she's screaming for her mommy. I have no doubt in my mind that that was Devany. I have no doubt in my mind. They say they cannot identify her, but I know how many children were in that house. I saw the children that were in that house, and she was the only 3 or 4 year old little girl.
That
And
is horrifying.
so mom was concerned about her daughter being sexually molested and actually had called the police to the Frodsham house. How she knew where they lived, I don't know, but she did make a wellness check on her daughter, and the police did show up. Everything was fine, no problem. And she got reprimanded for they call it custodial interference. That's their big one that they use. And so shortly after that, they severed her rights. While David Frodsham was under investigation for running a child sex pedo ring, they brought Deveny back to Tucson. They actually contacted the biological father and were accusing him of sexually molesting Devany because
So at
he
that,
has a past from when he was like 19 years old, had nothing to do with a child. But he went to prison for 10 years and he's a registered sex offender. I've never ever seen anything that made me believe that he would do anything to harm Devany. Um, and I believe that they used that against them as a way to sever their rights. They were trying to break
and
mom and dad up. They told mom, you know, get a restraining order against him and we'll give you your child back. That's another thing that they like to do is split the families up.
sure. And during this time, they already knew, or at least had a fair knowledge that this child was potentially being abused by this man. And it looks to me like it was not, it was a cover up. I mean, they're trying to push it off on the parents.
It's a
Obviously, the
total,
parents.
yeah, it's a total cover up.
And so when the mom was terminated, was she aware that this abuse was being alleged against the foster parent, or was she just, stunned that things had taken such a drastic turn in her case?
Um, I don't know if she was aware, but prior to that, January of 2015, he went to the foster care office to pick up his foster care check. And I believe they probably had 5 to 7 children in their house, so it was probably a really big check. But he showed up there drunk, and he had 2 toddlers in his vehicle. And they ended up dropping those charges. Why? I don't know. I believe that the older son had a driver's permit, and he may have said that he was driving, and they couldn't prove that he was actually operating the vehicle. That's why they dropped the charges, which was ridiculous. Um, so anyway, I believe shortly after that he became under investigation on the child pornography thing. Whether the mom was aware of it, I don't know. But she did go to one of her hearings, and they told her that they were going to make a decision on the severance. And so she was waiting to hear. And she actually had an attorney, a public defender, and he dropped the ball. She wanted to appeal it. He waited too long and then said, "Oh, I'm sorry. There, too much time's gone by. I can't appeal it."
And that's another
They
strategy they use against parents is manipulating the legal system so they don't get due process. My wife's attorney just outright, flatly refused to file her appeal. She told her, "Well, we'll see how your husband's appeal goes, and then we'll see if we're going to file yours." Just totally taking advantage of Amelia's, lack of legal knowledge. And then while we're litigating, because we're currently suing these people in federal court, part of their arguments is that, well, Ms. Schwab, she didn't even file an appeal. They're using what this attorney did against our family. And I see it so many times on like the Family Forward Project where people are saying, I need to appeal. My attorney won't appeal. What do I do? And so they're keeping this mom, her daughter's getting abused. They're keeping this mom in the dark, possibly what's going on, severs her rights, which I believe it looks like they were trying to stop the knowledge of this pedophile ring from becoming public. Um,
Of course they were.
when did it all break? What happened? How did the dam break? And what were the consequences for the child and for David?
Well, I believe that when he was arrested for the DUI, they did remove the foster children from that home, and I believe that Devany came back to Tucson. I don't believe that the mom was aware of that. She may have been. I can't really state for sure, but they severed mom's rights, and they had already had planned on putting Devany up for adoption. And so they found Samantha Osteroth. Well, this adoption agency did a background check on Samantha Osteroth and was warned not to let Samantha Osteroth adopt a child. She had 3 children of her own, and she was abusive to her husband and had a drinking problem and was violent. And that is
Wow.
documented. And they adopted her out to this woman anyway. And that was in August of 2016. Um, in December 29th of 2016, Samantha Osteroth held Deveny down in scalding water and burned over 70% of her body. Um, I believe she tried to kill her. I don't. She did finally go to court, and she was convicted to 15 years in prison and 15 years probation after that. I know that their own children were removed, and her husband divorced her. Um, that's all I know about Samantha Osteroth, but I'm
And she
thankful she
never
got
explained
15 years.
why she did that, or did that ever come out? Like,
N-
it seems to me almost intentional, putting this child with the psychopath, who is a key witness to uh, Arizona DCF overlooking pedophile rings. Because what I looked at, like I said, to the between 2002 and 2016, there were 38 police reports uh, written on
Yeah,
David's house, 10 reports of abuse and neglect, 10. And he still
yeah.
had foster kids.
They one of those reports to CPS was that they tied the kids to the bed, and DCS basically slapped him on the hands and said, now, you can't tie the kids to the bed." That was pretty much it.
And so mom gets this child removed and stuck in a pedophile ring over an argument in her front yard where the child isn't even present. And we have
Yeah,
Arizona DCF allowing this guy that drinks and drives with foster kids, it's raping foster kids, works for the Department of Defense, is pimping them out. It's insanity. It is utter insanity. And it's heartbreaking to hear that this child has gone from bad abuse to almost being murdered by these foster parents. Does anybody know where she is or what's happening to her? I mean, these are lifelong scars inflicted by people claiming to want to protect children, and it's completely outrageous.
as far as we know, and I don't even know this for sure. I believe that she might be at a foster facility, maybe Casa de los Niños, but I don't know that. Um, I do know that Devany lost all of her toes. Um, Samantha Osteroth let Devany lay for 5 or more hours before she called for help.
Oh
It,
my gosh.
it's so disgusting. I can't even talk about it without just breaking down. But she let that child lay in agony for hours before she called 911. And so her organs went into organ failure. Her organs shut down. Um, her toes had to be amputated. As far as I know, she hasn't fully gotten her organs back to full capacity. And she has to do very painful skin grafting, probably the rest of her life. Uh, Not to mention the emotional scars. I'm sure she has a very difficult time with coping with even wanting to take a bath, I'm sure. So I don't know who's caring for her. I know that her mom and dad have been beaten down, slandered, everything else, have fought and fought and fought, and they've lost hope, just like a lot of parents. You fight so long and so hard. It's like, what's the point anymore?
Yeah, and I can understand that. I mean, people that have not been engaged by this system have no idea of the psychological and physical toll. And you could tell from my pictures in the beginning. I mean, all this white happened during our DCF ordeal, but to have your child so viciously abused in the custody of people that were claiming you were an abuser is just an outrage to human dignity, to what we believe the justice system is about. What can be done, or what do you think people should be doing to stop this? What is it going to take for people to wake up and realize that children are not safe in foster care?
Well, in Arizona, Melinda Sherwin and I are in Tucson, and we have advocates up in Phoenix area, and they've been working a lot on legislation. And we do court watch. We go to court. We support each. If there's a parent that needs help in the Tucson or Arizona area, contact AZ DCS oversight. We support each other. We go to court. We don't intervene. We're there to support you. And nobody tells these parents what process they have to do, what motion they have to file, and they use that against you if you don't have a lawyer. And if you do have a lawyer, what's to say if they're going to file it? Like you were just saying, you can pay a lawyer and they won't do it. So we need knowledge. We need law. I mean, our Constitution, our law was written by the Constitution. Somehow it's gotten so twisted that we really need court reform. And the juvenile court that's why they gag parents. They operate in the dark. Nobody knows what goes on in juvenile court because you
Yeah,
can't talk
and
about it.
no, and people are in denial, and they say, well, if these people are involved, then the parents must have really done something. And yeah, well,
I don't know any perfect parents, do you? I
no,
mean,
and that's the key. It's a
we all do the
system.
best we can, and we raise our children, the best we can. Unless we're hurting them, nobody has the right to intervene how you want to raise your child.
And that's been constitutionally established by the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, these people, these devils that are doing this to kids, are doing it under the cover of secrecy, and claiming that they're protecting the children when they're really protecting their own liability. I did want to apologize to everybody that's watching. As you can see, my light has gradually gone away. I keep shifting my camera. I couldn't get home. I've been working all day, but I really felt like it was necessary to get this interview done. And so please forgive me for my bad lighting. But this is an awful story. And it's hard for me not to even tear up. And there's just, it breaks my heart because I have a daughter that age. And I remember when there were abuse situations going on upon my own children that we're still dealing with, but it was nowhere the magnitude that this family has endured. And that's why it's important we get this story out. It's why it's important that people begin to pay attention. Wake people up with this interview and show them this is something that you can research. You can go out and Google search these names and see this was a pedophile ring that was broken up by the FBI. And there is current litigation in the state of Arizona concerning many issues, not just these lawsuits. For America, Beth, what would you say to people that would say, I just don't think that DCF is that bad. They're really trying to help kids. Do you believe that child and human trafficking and even more pedophile rings are occurring in the foster care system around America?
I've been involved with, Child Protective Services and Department of Child Safety for years. And I did it because I truly want to help children. But the more, the longer I was in it, the more I saw that Nobody cares about these children. They shuffle them around like cattle, and I'm sure they don't even know where most of them are. I would think that I mean, there are good caseworkers, don't get me wrong, but the system is totally messed up and it needs to be abolished. It just needs to be abolished. There's should be absolutely no funding adoptions, or the average time to have your child in foster care is 15 months. If you don't get your child back in 15 months, chances are you're not going to. You can
Yeah, and
jump through all the hoops.
that's federal law.
Yeah, you can jump through all the hoops, take all the classes, do everything, and they will still keep your child. And they don't, they feel like they can just get away with it.
They are getting away
One of
with it.
the one of the co-chief sheriffs said that DCS, when it comes to children or any type of custody issues, DCS has the main say over the sheriff's department. Can you believe that? When did
And it's
that get
because
turned around?
Exactly. And it's because they're protected when you have high level people with top secret security clearance, with a history of pedophile activity, still operating rings. We know that this rabbit hole goes a lot deeper than just David, as we've seen even with the Epstein stuff and all the people that he's been connected with. The people have been banging this gong for years and years that there's pedophile rings, that these children are vanishing, not because they run away. We don't even fully know what's happening to these kids. I mean, if you think about it, they have every piece of information about these children possible. They know who their family is. They know if they don't have any family, and if they find a child that is ripe pickings to vanish away for whatever nefarious purpose they're going to utilize that child for, who's going to say anything? Who's going to know? There's thousands of missing kids. As a matter of fact, just recently they released reports there are thousands of missing immigrant children. They found a new funnel of children to take from. There was a story out of Kansas, and I don't remember the name of the foster parents. I believe we talked about this earlier, but they were collecting a check on a foster child that had been missing for 10 years. 10 years. And when they got arrested,
Wow.
the only thing they were charged with was fraud for collecting the check. And they said that the child ran away. He was 10 years old and allegedly ran away. That child has never been found to this day. Now, if any other parent lost a kid 10 years ago, was collecting some kind of benefit from the federal government for that child, they would be charged with murder, body or not. Here we had foster parents in the state of Kansas, and you can look this up because people are still writing news articles on it. That these kids are disappearing all over the place. And then we hear these stories like Arizona DCF, obvious pedophile ring, high level connections. Nobody's doing anything. They're trying to bury the story. Where are the legislators? Where are the
Oh,
high
you can
level?
look up Fort Huachuca Air Force Base. It's probably 30 miles from the Mexican border. It's
Which makes
probably the
sense.
closest military base to the Mexican border.
Are there any
They're
legislators that you know of that are trying to hold DCF in Arizona accountable? Any, the attorney general, anybody in a position of power
they're all crooked.
that's,
They're all crooked. We're talking about Doug Ducey and Mark Bronovich. We have been going after them hard. Melinda Sherwin, I mean, she goes to the DCS, their committee meetings. We had to fight. We wanted to be an oversight, an outside oversight. Greg McKay, the director of DCS, decided that they didn't need any oversight. They were going to go inside for their oversight. We had to fight so hard to be able to go to those meetings. No, they need oversight. We have been pushing and pushing and pushing hard. I think every state needs to get a group of people together and just start pushing. We need to push this. There needs to be transparency in what's going on here. Doug Ducey has never answered to what has happened to Deveny. Neither has Greg
And the same
McKay.
and the same thing happened in
How did
Kansas. The current governor of Kansas um, was part of the oversight committee. People fought to have regular citizens on that committee. They shut them out and then put people like Phyllis Gilmore, the head of DCF, who was the problem in that oversight committee. And then the current governor of Kansas, as soon as she got power, she stopped blowing hard at the media and how DCF needed to be reformed, and she actually defunded it. And now they don't even have an oversight committee. So I agree with you. There needs to be citizens that are not only willing to step up, but are willing to fight and hold elected officials accountable by getting them out of office, filing lawsuits for information, whatever we can do to get some sort of citizen oversight, where if there's professionals involved, there's also regular day-to-day citizens. We have to start turning this around, because I'm sure Devany is not the only victim in the country of such awful circumstances. Um, and
no, unfortunately, she's just one of thousands, and it's sad. I haven't had a good night's sleep in years. Um, how can I give up on? I can't give up on this little girl. This little girl is precious. She's so precious. There's just no way. I just
well,
pray that she's being loved.
Beth, I'm really thankful that you came on. We're running out of time here, and maybe we can have you again on in the future for more updates, or things that you guys are doing in the state of Arizona. Um, Now, you shared with me that you definitely have some skills as an investigator. If people wanted to utilize you to help do research, to find people, even as an advocate, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, I am on Twitter as at Child Protector. Um, I can send you my other information.
Okay, and we'll post it in the comment section or somewhere where you feel comfortable, because obviously we don't want to just put everybody's information out there everywhere. But I know that right
Yeah, I
now,
just want to say, as a citizen standing up, it's a pretty dangerous job. I do have to say that, because you will be threatened, you will be followed, but I'm not going to be deterred, and I'm going to keep on going. And I just want to give a one little class short update on Melissa Deagle. Um, if anybody can write to the Arizona Maricopa jail, the Estrella jail, she needs our support. She has been sitting in jail on child abuse charges when Arizona DCS seized her children 4 years ago. They extradited her from Florida on child abuse charges on that um, Munchausen by proxy
right.
charge, which is absolutely ridiculous. But she has medical conditions, and we need to keep pushing. She needs to be out of jail. They're holding her in jail. She's already paid a $10,000 bond. They want her to pay another 8 felony charges.
Yeah, we did a show on when that happened, and I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show. I was just talking about that because recently we heard that she was having some health issues. The jail tried to claim she was fine. Then another doctor looked at her, said she had a bowel obstruction, which could be fatal. And so, yeah, definitely, we'll get the information for the Maricopa County Jail. If you know it, feel free to put any contact information for Melissa Deagle in the comments under this video.
Okay.
Really appreciate your bravery in coming on, Beth, and hope we can have you again as a guest soon.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to get Devany's story out. Her story needs to be told. All of these stories need to be told.
I agree. I agree. And if you just want to hold on for a second, I'll talk to you a little bit after we get off. But Unfortunately, it's just getting darker and darker here in my truck. So we're going to close this evening of We Hold These Truths. Please share this video. Get this story out. We need to hold Arizona DCS accountable.